Now,
So we'll call the meeting back to order after break, and we do have Michael with us. And good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Senator Starr. How are you?
Well, I think I'm getting better. I hope I'm getting better. I was thinking about missing time down there, and I think this is the first trip I've ever had to stay home and work on Zoom from not being in too good a shape. Michael, in regards to our bill that I think Brian Campion had some questions in regards to our right to farm bill. And I don't know if he had a chance to chat with you yet or not, but did you make that call, Brian?
We haven't had a chance to talk yet. No, I do think, let me just pull up my notes. You know, I'll be surprised, Bob, Mr. Chair, if I really get to a yes on it. So I wouldn't hold off on me. It may need to leave 4-1, I'm afraid. But I can, you know, I don't know if, I also don't want to hold the committee up with a bunch of amendments that I think the committee probably wouldn't support. So I'm fine if you all want to just move it without me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is this something, Senator Starr, that you're hoping would make it, if it leaves here tomorrow, for example, where does it go next? Does it have to go any? I know Judiciary will want it, but does that prevent it from going to crossover? Are you under a time constraint?
No, not under any time constraint. I'm just trying to address your concerns in some way, if that was at all possible, so that we would have a good solid vote out of committee.
I appreciate that and respect that, and really grateful for your willingness to. I mean, I can, if again, I'm happy to put together some amendments, but I don't think I'm going to get there. I just want to be, I'll be surprised if I get there. So I don't want to hold everybody any moving forward for me.
Yeah. Well,
but I respect, what you're trying, the work that the committee's done.
Yeah. Well,
not enough. Not enough so you can vote for it.
Well, maybe you'll come down with COVID and have to stay home and can't.
That was good.
Well, I didn't know if it was good. I figured you either wanted me to get COVID or you wanted to put one of those things around me that we're getting for the cattle, so I can't come in the committee room. The electric fence.
Well, maybe I'll have you and Richie change seats and I'll come back tomorrow. No, I wouldn't wish this what I've got on to anybody. But anyways, Michael, we've had quite a lot of testimony in regards to our organic dairy guys, and I don't know if you've been able to listen to any of that, but I thought we ought to maybe get started on trying to put a bill together.
So would this be separate from what was in budget adjustment that passed the House?
Yes. Where they where they wanted, the House suggested that, we do a payment, and I think we've got enough, I think we've gathered enough, information to get a bill started that we could send down to approach. And committee, be sure and weigh in on any of this, as we talk with Michael in regards to the issue. But we roughly have, I think we decided basically that we would use the calendar year of 22, from January through December 31 of 2022. That we haven't talked as a committee much about the dollar amount, but it would be for the organic dairies that were shipping milk through December 31 of 2022. And it would be to offset payment losses that they incurred on their farm. It would, I don't know if we need to put a number in there, but what we heard that there was 121 certified, 127 farms.
Right. 6 were medium and the remaining 121 were either small or certified small.
Yeah, so 6 medium, so it gives us a total of 127 farms. And from hearing I don't know, do you have to put a statement of purpose in that, Michael?
You don't have to put a statement of purpose in it, but I think it would help for this bill.
Well, it was basically, my take on it was basically it was caused by the additional cost of feed, organic dairy feed, to the farmers, and the price, it went from $858 a ton in 2020 to as high as, God, it went up.
It was almost 1,600.
It was like 1,500, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, almost 1,600.
Per ton in 2022. And that was due to the fact that a lot of their feed is organic feed is imported from other countries, and the shipping costs, container costs, went right through the roof. We also had testimony that, as a rule, about the feed companies were carrying about an 8% overdue payment schedule in 2020, and that has gone to now 18% over the last in 2022. And they're, carrying farmers at the best rate they can, but that has added to the farmer costs. The the other issue that we heard when we talked with the two purchasers was that there, during the pandemic, sales dropped off to a certain degree, and that made a surplus of organic milk because people just weren't buying it. And so that has not corrected itself at this point, so that, the people that buy this and sell it don't feel that they can raise the retail price of the milk because people don't have the money. Is there some other issues in there that created the price, Brian and then Irene?
Yep. I think if I remember correctly, and I, again, don't mean to mischaracterize it, this isn't true. Much of the organic feed is imported from India. And there was some sort of scare because of a potential, I don't want to say contamination, but there was something that it turned out to not be true, but it drove the price way up because they had a recall order on that particular. And let's be honest, they have fewer options in the organic world in terms of feed. Conventional is a little bit more flexible in terms of where people buy their feed and what they buy, but in the organic sector, it's a little less so. So that really drove the price up if they couldn't get the stuff from India.
So, just ask, because that gets into, the grain from India was grain. And as I look at the organic, I've got grass-fed and then I've got organic. And I don't get the sense of how many of the 121 are grass-fed versus that, and
Jen
what
Miller,
that looks
yeah,
like.
she might be the only one that could give us numbers on that. I don't know either.
No.
But at
I
any
don't-
rate, it went up really high, and then consumer choices at the retail level also are a factor where, it's more expensive. And so if you're feeling the effects of inflation, you may choose a different product to save money for your own family.
Yeah,
Can I ask a question?
sure.
So you said this is for calendar year 2022, January 1, December 31. For what purpose? Are they being paid per hundredweight that they shipped during that time?
Yeah,
It's not about their costs, it's about what they shipped. And then
Right.
what is the amount per hundredweight?
Well, we've talked about that a little, but have not come to a definite conclusion on the price. But the house had a $5 per hundredweight. And we do have the numbers on that. We got those from Laura this morning. It's about 1.38 million pound.
138,313,566 pounds of milk were shipped. If you multiply that times the $5 per hundredweight, you come out with 6.915678 million.
You said 101,380,000
I'm sorry, 138 million,
pounds,
313,566 pounds.
but then you're paying per hundredweight?
Right.
Or you're paying per
So 1.38.
1.38? Okay.
And again, we use the $5 because that's what was given to us as sort of the magic number that would make people whole. So if you do the math there, you come up with 6.9 million as opposed to the 9.2, which was originally asked for. So the difference is 2.3 million, and I'm not sure how that was arrived at.
Well, I'm not sure how they totally came up with the $5.
Okay.
So who do we usually look to for those numbers?
This Jen, isn't Jen coming
Oh,
next week
Jen's coming.
from NOFA?
That's right. Jen Miller.
Yeah, I think she can give us a little better picture of the variation involved with farm to farm. And, you know, not everybody has the same feed costs.
Right.
If you have more cows, you have more cows. If fewer, you have fewer, right?
And if you are grass, it's different than
That's
it
right.
is grain. And I can't tell you with 121, how many are grain and how many are grass.
I don't think we know.
Those numbers aren't working for my brain right now.
Which ones?
You have 1.38 million
Yep.
pounds. And so you're gonna pay per 100 weight, so you divide by 100.
No,
That means you,
it's 1.38. That's 100 weight. That's how, if you divide the 1.3, the 1 billion,
oh, is it 1 billion?
no, it's 138 million. One, 100, 300,
138, all right, there we go. Now we're making sense.
Does that work better?
Got it. 6.9, got it,
Oh, lost Bobby.
got it.
Bob, you there?
Now let's just pull it up.
Right.
Bobby go bye-bye.
So there's a lot of moving parts here. And, you know, then there's a possibility of federal help from a couple of different sources, and which would help lower the state's share of it. I don't think we have a clear picture yet of what we need to do.
I have enough information here to
Well, we can,
to start a bill. Is there any timing? Like, do you want this set up by the agency by a certain time? Like, you want it to be done by a certain time?
what I'm remembering is they sort of already have in place a system where if we gave them the per 100 weight number, they would just do the math and write a check and send it out.
Okay,
Yeah,
so,
maybe Jesus
What
Christ.
we're waiting for is to hear from the federal delegation as to when this other money might be released. There's $100 million that is out there
Well,
somewhere.
the other pieces, the money will be incorporated in the budget.
right,
And the budget will be, you know, we're a month out from,
yeah. I mean, I think whatever you draft as a bill is just gonna go into the budget, just like,
Yep.
just like the other area.
and then that way it doesn't have to be processed.
Bobby's coming back. There he is. So we're bringing Michael up to date, Bobby, and I think we gave him as much information as we have right now. There's still some uncertainty at the federal level in terms of whatever help they might give and that kind of thing, but
Yeah, and, we haven't talked about it, but did you want to go with the, suggested amount from the House on a per 100 weight basis?
Well, not until we talk to Jen next week, but you know, for the purposes of drafting, I think we're good for using 5, right?
Yeah, placeholder, I put the 5 in, but I think that number is all up in the air too.
Well, plus if, with Laura's numbers, that got down to 87 cents or some pretty
It's free.
small number if the Fed's money comes through.
right.
But approach will, I'm sure they'll we'll talk about that number down there corresponding with the federal money as well, so. So I don't know, what else do you need, Michael, in there that,
I don't need anything else. I think I'm good. Do you want me to draft it and then circulate it to some of the interested parties like NOFO or Laura or whomever?
yeah, I think, you know, especially, maybe we as a committee ought to have it for a day to look over when do you think you might do this, Michael?
I think if you don't want it by tomorrow, I would probably do it on Monday.
So, would it be safe to have a meeting for us on Tuesday to go over what you've come up with, and then we could send it out to get feedback from our, you know, people that have interest?
Yeah, that timing works great with me.
Yeah. So I guess, and you understand, I thought, did you guys, while I got booted off, did you talk at all about this would be for producers that were shipping milk as of December 31 of 22?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So they don't need to be in business right now.
Correct.
Right. Well, I think the ones that, the only 100 weights that we actually have, their solid numbers are the ones that were shipping last year through December 31, because milk reports lag at least 30 days behind when it shipped to the buyer.
Yeah.
And so those are the only solid numbers, but I thought they reported to us that there's still 130 odd farms that are organic. You know, so the numbers haven't changed. I don't know if some new people got in and some left, but it's within a few, one way or the other.
Okay.
Okay, and then the other issue is, did finance have you in yesterday in regards to our miscellaneous ag bill?
Yes, they did.
Yeah, and concerns were raised in regards to the last section of the bill where municipalities were charging farmers a fee for discharging.
Yes, it was the Association of Water Treatment. I can't remember their full name, but they represent all the stormwater and municipal sewer departments in the state, and then a couple of the specific cities: St. Albans, St. Lobbyist, South Burlington had a stormwater there. South Burlington's had a stormwater called me on Tuesday, and he's not so concerned about not assessing or not charging farms. He's concerned with, he thinks the language is too broad. I don't necessarily agree with him, but I proposed a way to resolve that to finance. But the association made an argument that if you exclude farms from stormwater fees, municipal stormwater fees, then it creates inequity. And then it's a slippery slope that others will be starting to go to the legislature to look for exemptions from municipal stormwater fees. I just raised the point, I don't think they have the authority to issue these fees at all. I don't. They're relying on Title 24, 44, 14, which authorizes municipalities to adopt bylaws to regulate stormwater. But under 4413, which is the section which is the limitations on all municipal bylaws, municipalities cannot regulate required agricultural practices. And the association said, oh, well, the required agricultural practices, those are only about point source discharges from farms. And that is exactly the opposite of what the required agricultural practices are. The required agricultural practices are for the control of non-point source pollution. Another name for non-point source pollution is stormwater. And so I don't think they have the authority to assess underneath the bylaw that they're claiming the authority. And so, and they clearly have a misconception about what the RAPs are. And so Brian Patch was in there making similar arguments. But you do have the chair of natural resources on that committee. You do have a member from South Burlington on that committee. You do have a member from Burlington on that committee. Those are all, they're all legislators invested in management of stormwater. And so I'm not surprised that they want to slow it down.
Well, what the deal is on it at the present time is that Senator Bruce going to try to keep the bill in finance, but Bray and Natural Resources is going to look at that section of the bill. And I don't know if they've invited you in or not to talk on that.
Not yet, no.
And they certainly didn't invite Brian in, who's a reporter on the bill from our committee, to talk about why we did what we did to that section. And so did finance have you in yesterday or just Ryan?
They had me in yesterday.
Yeah.
I explained what I just explained to you. I explained that I don't think there's an issue with the language. I explained that I could resolve South Burlington's issue with the language. But then Senator Cummings said they weren't going to vote on it, and so I had to go to committee.
Yeah. Well, I think that, you know, our big objection was, of course, what we learned from both you and Ryan, and that's why we left that language in the bill. And because farmers shouldn't have to pay twice and shouldn't be, if they're already regulated under the RA, they shouldn't be discharging water to the municipality anyhow. So so probably Natural Resources will hopefully have both you and us and Ryan back in their committee either tomorrow or early next week. But hopefully Ann will keep the bill in her committee, so it doesn't end up dying in natural resources. The other option is that we could pull that section from the bill, possibly have the House add it in, and then agree in a committee or conference to go for it. But if that's a better way of getting it done. But I'd rather let Chris look at it and try to understand, natural resources understand that they don't really have any jurisdiction. The wastewater people don't have any jurisdiction over that anyhow, so.
You also will have the opportunity to put it on the House miscellaneous ag bill, because they voted that out of committee yesterday.
Yes, so if we really wanted to push it along, we could eliminate that, but if we can get it resolved in the Natural Resources Committee, so they understand that we aren't trying to take advantage of anybody, we're trying to be equitable to everybody, and so maybe we'll let it ride until midweek or toward the end of next week, and we'll deal with it then after Natural Resources has had an opportunity to visit it. Does that make sense to the committee?
Yeah, I think you're right. Otherwise, if we put it in the if the House miscellaneous ag bill, it's gonna be the same issue.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
I would be more clever than that. It would go back into our bill over on the House side, and then we would agree to it in a committee of conference. Okay, anything else on the payment program?
I don't think so.
Good to go there.
Irene's hands up.
I got called on before about it.
What about our electronic fencing issue? Do you think we need to put anything together in draft form for that?
I think it's still premature. I wanted to ask Laura, but I understand she probably couldn't have answered how many people applied for the electronic fencing grant. I'm assuming there was at least one who we heard from, and she did say that everybody that applied is going to know whether they got it by next week or the week after. So that to me would be a good time to start worrying about how much short he is and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so maybe then we can just collect more data and get ourselves in a position where we can answer all the questions once we move forward.
I think so.
Yeah. Is there Michael, did on the agenda had something about you were going to look at Maine's program to prevent animal cruelty?
Yes, I'm prepared to do that.
Yeah. So is the committee ready to move to that now?
Sure.
Any
Yeah.
question? Yeah, Go ahead, Michael.
Well, you can see this all on the committee website. So I can share screen if you would like. But the first thing you look at when you look at the main animal welfare program is that, oh, I think it's broken. Is that it's a pretty vigorous program. They have their own division within their Agency of Agriculture. They have a very specific statutory scheme with things such as an Animal Welfare Act, requirements for municipal enforcement. They require every municipality to have an animal control officer. They require that animal control officer to be certified. They require that animal control officer to do annual training of 8 hours, at least 8 hours of training. They have county response teams. They have the ability for law enforcement to respond to any complaint. And they have specific standards for things like animals at loose, damage by animals, and then certain standards set by the type of animal. And that to me was really interesting because that to me meant they get funded. And when you look at the budget for the animal welfare division, there's a couple of different numbers out there, but I went to Maine's current budget, and under their current budget, the animal welfare program in Maine has 12 full-time employees, and they have for 2023 a projected budget of $2,561,000.
You know what we are roughly like employees,
Nothing near that.
like maybe one employee or not even.
Well, there really isn't a state employee that's dedicated solely to animal welfare. The veterinarians at the agency have expertise and are often consulted, especially on issues such as whether or not there's adequate shelter of livestock. But the agency is not involved in the general cruelty to animals like dogs, cats, etc. That is something that they are not statutorily responsible for. That is left to law enforcement and humane officers. And so there's basically no centralized animal welfare program in the state. It's all left to municipalities and then what the agency does for livestock. And one of the other things that I wanted to know is how is Maine funding that program? And so you go to their last annual report that I could find is from 2021. And that's not a great year for income because it's COVID, but you go to their income and they get income from dedicated fees on registered feed, dedicated fees on dog licensing for spay and neuter, other dedicated fees for dog licensing. They have animal welfare plates, license plates. They have facility licensing fees for kennels, etc. They have surcharge on any license. They basically make around 1.8 million from their dedicated fees. And so in any given year, they're probably getting 200 to 700,000 general fund dollars as well, from what I can determine. And honestly, their income is probably higher than it was in 2021. So they have a vigorous program. They have vigorous response requirements, and Ashley Angel from our office, law clerk from our office, did a memo on response that's on your committee website as well. And she can talk to you about that if you want to talk to her about that. But the key thing is they've got money to
Right.
do all of this and to fund 12 people at an agency, and then to pass money to the municipalities to fund their efforts. And Maine has a vigorous county government, which is really easy to draft for as a if you say, hey, county, all you counties have to do something.
There's county government.
Right, and
So I had a chance to read some of what you sent. And obviously the landscape is different between Maine and Vermont. They've got a budget of 12 billion.
yes.
We have 6 billion, so, we're half.
Their budget is 836 feet long.
Yeah. Population is gonna be a factor too. I mean, if you're gonna get funding and revenue from dog licensing, the more people that live in a particular place, the more likely they are to be able to contribute, more to that. So if you had to, and just geographically, it's way different. I mean, it must take almost a day to go from the southern part to the northern part of Maine. It's a big, big state. So reducing it to sort of our level, and I don't know how we're gonna do that necessarily. Instead of 12 people, do we have 4, 5? I don't know. We don't have a county government that is structured the same way. So it would be a little bit of a challenge to come up with that. I definitely think we should do something. This was all highlighted, and we had great testimony from the death of all those goats and stuff. So there isn't one state agency that's in charge of this. It's
Right.
The dog license is now money goes where?
Town clerks. Right.
Most of it is, there's money that's dedicated for the spay and neutering program.
Yep,
There's money that is retained by the municipality.
yep,
And that's basically
and that's it.
Yeah.
And do we know how many dogs are registered?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I can try to figure that out. I could probably ask the league if they have that number.
And right now, I'm just looking for a ballpark on what that might range.
We probably could back calculate that from the spay and neuter surcharge. We could probably figure out that's how many licenses are issued.
And then I could have a better comparison between what Maine does in that and what we do. Because quite frankly, if we're lower, then it might be a little surcharge on them that might help with a person.
Yeah, we don't have license plates. Right.
No, but we do have, the registration
Yeah.
fees and that, and,
It's a place to start.
no, if there was gotta be more than 100,000.
Well, here's an article back from 2013, more than 2/3 of Vermonters at least own one pet.
Right, so that would be 4,000 or 400,000 pets, and if half of those are dogs, $1 would get you started.
Okay. So can I talk to JFO about kind of back calculating how much?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You okay with that, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, but I see a vast difference between
Yeah.
what Maine is doing and what we do for animal cruelty. Yeah, I think it's very hard to compare us to them or vice versa. And they do a lot county-wise over there in Maine, Michael.
Yes, that's how a lot of their programs work. They set a kind of a minimum default and tell the county that they either have to do their own county rule or the minimum default is going to go into effect.
Yeah,
So counties are inspired to adopt their own requirements, and they do, and they're even in the rural areas, the the unincorporated areas in Maine, they have kind of vigorous government.
see, I think we in Vermont have animal control officers, and I know we do in Troy and things, and if we have a domestic issue with a, dog, cats, hoofed animals in the village, the animal control officer is the one that follows up on that. And I don't know about the towns you folks come from, if you have an animal control. We used to call them dog catchers years back, but they're up north here, they're called animal control officers, and I believe each town either elects one or the select board appoints one.
Police chief does, right?
Yeah, right. And sometimes it's just one of the police officers for the town. I don't know. I don't think there's required to get specific training.
No, there's no training, and I think every town,
Does it differ?
yeah, and it's all over the map.
And they don't have particular authority over anything either, though. I mean, they can't,
Unless they're a law enforcement.
well, yes, yeah.
Right.
But in Rutland, they separate, I guess, the licensed officers, and then there's one guy that is not licensed. But
I would say in the system that Bobby laid out, I think he's correct. I think when they run into trouble in any community, that somebody calls ag.
Yeah.
And there's no consistent place where if the veterinarian has some time to do that, but there's no consistent place that once this elevates to where it gets to a place that's trouble, that there's no place to call.
Right. I agree. There is no centralized entity that has jurisdiction there.
And I can say in the startup, I don't want to hold department or anything to start out, but I think figuring out a way to have a central place to call and maybe halftime for some person that, yeah, and I would suggest that ag would be a good place to do it.
So I don't know how ag feels about it. I just know when I first started here, one of the most controversial issues I worked on was the pet dealer.
Yeah,
And it was whether or not you could breed your dogs and cats in your backyard, or whether that be licensed or not. And the agency at that point had authority over licensing pet dealers, and they hated it. They hated it because there was something called the backyard breeder exception. You didn't need a license if you were just selling the offspring of your pets. So they would go to a home that had 40 dogs and say, you don't have a license, you need a license. And the person would say, no, I don't need a license, come in, here are all my pets. And they'd be like 40 dogs, Cocker Spaniels in the house. And they really, really did not like
no.
implementing that program. And so it went away. The pet dealer went away, the backyard license dealer went away. And so I would be very curious as to how the agency feels about getting back into that kind of work.
I think they would tell us that their plate is overflowing.
I agree with that.
So I think to, not to drill down on the details, but if there's, maybe we could publicize if there's an animal, hoofed animal problem that the agency would, that would be the place to call or something along those lines. But I doubt very much if they'd want to get into the small animal.
But goats are a hoofed animal, and the issue in Charlotte, the agency was contacted, and they don't really have enforcement or response requirements. There's the Livestock Care Advisory Council. There are
Humane
some
societies.
rules for livestock care, but if you're asking for whether they have enforcement, they don't have enforcement.
So that would be turned over to the local police department, I would take it.
That is for the local animal control officer.
Yeah. Well, maybe,
The animal cruelty law in Vermont is a criminal statute. It has some opportunity for civil penalties, but it is a crime. It is a criminal statute.
Well, that's why their first recommendation in their report was animal cruelty investigation should be a law enforcement function. And they put that in there.
Whose report is that?
That was.
Wilbur Wright?
Yeah, the Vermont Animal Cruelty Task Force report to the Vermont House and Senate Judiciary Committees.
Her suggestion, if I'm remembering correctly, was the creation of a new division, use whatever word you want, in ag with a director, and that there would be some authority given to that division to enforce.
Yeah,
I mean, that's,
I don't want a division, but I think
Yeah.
at least someplace where, because and they also made a recommendation here that animal cruelty officers should have to take a day-long course to do that. Well, a lot of my small towns, if you told as Bobby said it used to be called the dog catcher, that you've got to take a day off from work to do this, you couldn't fill the position.
you wouldn't have any more dog catchers.
You wouldn't have any more dog catchers. I hear their problem that once you've exhausted your local animal control officer, what do?
see, the other issue is, we have a lot more goats around Vermont now than we did 15 years ago, with farmers milking goats. So Michael, if the ag agency has no jurisdiction over goats, do they have any jurisdiction over heifers and cows?
So they do. Let's look at or let's talk about Title 13 cruelty to animals. So there's an exception in the cruelty to animals law. I'm just gonna find it before I. So there are standards in the animal cruelty law for adequate food and adequate shelter and adequate water. And one of the things that those standards do, it says that they shall have the food according to the standard unless the food is being provided or withheld according to livestock and poultry husbandry practices. And so that term livestock and poultry husbandry practices is used throughout. And there's a specific exception that the animal cruelty statutes do not apply to livestock and poultry husbandry practices for the raising, management, and use of animals. So that is where the agency gets involved. It's like if someone complains and say, hey, it's one of the ones when I was involved with this a little too much a few years ago, is that people were calling in and saying, these cattle in this field are out in sub-zero temperature. There's no building anywhere. There's just a row of trees. Well, it turns out those cattle are Scottish cattle, and you can't get them to go into a building half the time. And by the way, a row of trees is what's called adequate natural shelter. And so the agency has to go out and look and say, oh, that's in accordance with livestock and poultry husbandry practices. That's what the agency does in these issues. And prior to any enforcement action that involves livestock, the agency has to be consulted. So if a local animal control officer goes out and sees a starving horse, that they have to consult with the agency of ag prior to bringing that enforcement action. So maybe they say, well, that horse is actually a thoroughbred. It's supposed to look like that. It's supposed to have some of its ribs shown, etc. And so that's where the agency gets involved.
So, can they regulate goats or
Yes,
not?
goats are livestock. Goats
Yeah.
are livestock.
So,
But yet in the Charlotte issue, they said they couldn't get involved.
I don't know all the facts of the Charlotte issue. I think, I don't know all of the facts. It's hard for me to say what they did and what they didn't do.
can I ask?
Right.
Who regulates horses?
They're livestock.
Horses are livestock?
Yeah.
Because the distribution of, they've been getting 500 complaints a year. And the distribution by animal types of the complaints they get, 42% are dogs, 15% are cats, horses are 21%. So dogs, cats, and horses make up 80% of this. And between goats, cows, and pigs, which I think would be definitely ag, would, you're talking in 14 or 15%. But if they have horses, it's 14 or 15% plus, so about a third are under ag now, and the rest I'm not sure where they fit.
So livestock is defined as cattle, bison, horses, sheep, goats, swine, cervidae, ratites, and camelids. That's a little out of date. There aren't really ratites and cervidae in this state anymore. There are a couple of camels. Yeah. The water buffalo are gone, but there are some buffalo.
Yeah, I think, well, Richie, you were around when we did that
Yeah,
rewrite golly, we were both, I think, over in the house.
Yeah,
So, ma-
yeah, go
so
ahead.
go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying, it would lead to me because of that experience. I think on the animal control officer, we need to have a place where there's a half-time person or a person that stuff goes through. Because there's an educational component to this, there's, and then you have, when you have a really bad experience, like in Charlotte, there's no place for anybody to go to get, and that's just not right.
I agree.
So the question is, what's the lightest touch we can put on this that moves us in a better direction?
Well, it's been, what's it been, Michael, 20 years or more, 25 since that was, the present law was drafted up?
The General Assembly just amended the adequate shelter, adequate water, and adequate food standards.
19.
Yeah, maybe just three or 4 years ago. Brent did it.
Yeah.
Oh,
2019, it looks like.
so. So how do we get at Richie's issue other than getting the League of Cities and Towns in and seeing why they don't have their animal control officers better trained, maybe?
Could be a good start. I mean,
I still like the idea, and I don't know how you let people know, but the idea of one phone number, one email, one person somewhere, and probably inside the ag department, which means another position. That people can at least reach out and say, hey, this is what's going on down here in Brattleboro or up here in Canaan, and what do I do? And then that person would have the ability to coordinate a response through maybe the animal control officer or the police or the Humane Society or whatever works best in that particular area. And I don't know, funding wise, I don't think we're talking about a ton of money.
Right, what,
That many dogs and you put one, a buck, $1 on registration.
you're gonna cover it.
what we would have to do is get our vet in and see if they could handle something like that in one of, I think they have 3 vets over there. See if they could handle something like that and where, where would it be and who might be able to do that?
Yep. Let Dr. House come in.
So maybe, Linda, maybe next week, if we got some time, we could get Dr. Haas in regards to that, to see, just to chat about it.
Dogs are 42% of all complaints.
I don't know of any other agency that would be a proper place to disseminate the information.
I think the ag agency is the right place.
And 500, a little over 500 complaints a year, that's real work. I mean, that's gonna take somebody to do that.
I will say that this spay and neuter program is at the Agency of Human Services.
You're right. I remember that too.
It is.
Yeah.
You wanted it there?
No.
You shouldn't be.
So-
It's a long history.
So-
Get into why.
So how many, you asked how many cases? 13, there was 488. 2014 was 506. There was 462 in 2015. that's the last data they had in this report.
Oh,
That, and,
sounds
so,
like it's 500, 600 a year, 400 a year.
yeah, it was a high 400s, 500 for those 3 years. in a row.
That'd still work. If all of those went to one person, that's work.
Yeah.
Calling.
Gonna have to pay it.
So that's a 100 grand, 120 grand deal then.
Well, I'll take it for that.
Yeah.
Jeez. I could
That's
do it
just the
here.
cost of the full-time employee, that's not your actual salary.
No, sure, that's not bad.
Yeah,
I don't want a department of 12.
Right.
right.
I don't, we don't need a
I
department.
think we
of
agree
12.
on that.
Yeah.
Would you say Maine's the most vigorous? You probably don't know.
I can't respond to that, but I do know that some of the western states, because of the extent of livestock management, have specific livestock care officers
Okay.
that just go out and make sure that fences are mended, make sure that cattle are where they're supposed to be, make sure that they're being fed.
Different worlds.
Right, that sounds like a perfect job for Richie. He loves fences and things like that.
Riding horses.
Get me a no fence and I'll be even happier.
So it sounds like we're gonna have the veterinarian in, Dr. Haas?
Yeah, we'll get Dr. Haas in and have a chat with them and the animal control board, she looks after that. And I think we had them in.
We
So,
did, yes.
yeah, and but to follow up, we'll have her in and maybe from that have the league in to see what they're doing and suggesting what they are doing with their municipalities and their animal control office.
Well, that report they had recommended that every animal control officer go for a day's training each year.
Which is basically what Maine does, they have 8 hours a year for their.
Yeah, that they recommended that. They also recommended a whole commission be put together to oversee this, which is, to start out, I would.
Well, I guess the first thing is we'll hear from the agency and what they think and how things are going and they might even be able to give us the cost of if they were to take the lead on this, what would be involved.
Yep, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I think we should do something.
Anything else for Michael, Irene?
Yeah, it just occurs to me if we decide to say add $1 to the dog licensing fee or something that, at least in Essex town, we kind of rely on the goodwill of people to show up and pay that April 1st. We don't have a way to track down the fact that everybody's got 3 dogs,
Nobody does.
except that when we knock on doors and we, as candidates, go, oh, another house with dogs. But there are very few, I think, percentage wise that just voluntarily send in their $14 or whatever it is. So I think if we're going to fund it that way, we have to find a way to make sure everybody's paying it.
That everybody pays and not just the volunteers, huh?
But I don't know how you do that.
Anything else?
On the porch.
Amy has a question. You remember Amy?
You can't see me. Emma Scholdice, I also represent the Clerks and Treasurers Association, and I just sent a quick email to our clerk who is in Barry, and she says the treasurer, they report to the treasurer, so they would have all of the information, all the towns and they do. But she says in Barry about 600 people register, and she thinks that's about half have dogs. That was her just guesstimate, but she has about 600 who register.
There's $300.
So
Amy, your voice is
Right, but it's not
sounding a
mandatory.
lot like Emma.
What?
Your voice is sounding a lot like Emma's voice.
Yeah, so we could maybe have Dr. House and the league come in and, maybe they've got an idea too that we could use. I mean, there's a problem, we're gonna fix it.
Well, very good. Is there anything else, Michael, that you have for us?
Not right now,
No?
no.
Well, hopefully Natural Resources will ask you in regards to our miscellaneous bill and we'll deal with that when we get to it. So, thank you, Michael, for your morning time and is there anything else that the committee wants to bring up for this morning?
Nope.
If not, we'll go off the air and recess the meeting and we'll